Chapter 34. Pink, green, and yellow lights illuminated the tent Hafsa's parents erected behind their home for the Mendy. I stepped onto the carpeted floor of the tent with my family. My father wandered over to the folding chairs set up outside the tent for the men under the night sky. Rabia and Safa held tight to my camise as if I might vanish without warning. The bride, Hafsa's eldest sister, Shabnam, sat perched on a cushioned stage in the center of a tent. So this is like we're describing what a wedding, like a typical Pakistani wedding looks like. So listen and see how it sounds like similar to ours. A yellow veil framed her face, and her hands were already covered with henna patterns. Now the henna artist was swirling intricate designs of flowers and birds onto her feet. We walked over to sit on the cushions below Shubnam's stage. I smiled a little at how subdued she seemed. Hafsa and her sister were not the docile sort, but the bride was doing her best to look the part for the occasion. Seema picked up a henna cone left out by one of the guests to use and began swirling it on my hand. "Are you done?" I asked her after a while. "My hand is aching." "Be patient. I have to get the pattern right. You squirm too much." "Sorry." I tried to still myself. The designs in my palms would take hours to dry, but tomorrow the deep brown Seema painted on would transform into a brilliant orange. It would eventually fade away completely, but for a little while, when I was back at Jawad Sahib's estate, these hands would remain colored with the memory of this night. A new song started up, and I watched Hafsa and Farah dance with the third girl. It was Sana, Nazreen Baji's niece. Their braids were woven with marigolds, and they wore matching outfits. Chatter swirled around me, gossip about the groom, the dowry. "You poor dear," a woman said to me. It was Hira, the butcher's wife. She settled next to me and tucked her feet under herself. "Everyone is beside themselves about you having to live in the same place as that monster." "What's it like in there?" another woman asked. Drove by the place once, but you can't even see the roof from the road." "It's those walls he's got," my neighbor Belkis interjected. "Walls and bushes to keep everyone far away." "Does he have a waterfall in the house?" Hira asked me. "No, there's no waterfall," I said. "I knew a woman who worked for them years ago. Told me about a waterfall right in their living room." "Heard about the gold staircases too," Belkis nodded. "Now that Nazreen," Hira clicked her tongue, "came from the village over on the other side of the market, but thinks she's something else now. Doesn't even bother to see her family anymore." "She's nice," I interrupted. "She's been good to me. She really has." But they continued their conversation as though I hadn't spoken. I watched their animated expressions and listened to the theories of Nazreen Baji's past and the details of the estate. Seema squeezed my wrist. "Ignore them," she said. "They're just gossiping." She was right. For these women, my circumstances were a juicy story. One they could whisper about and cluck their tongues over before moving on to other things. They didn't have to tiptoe around Jawad Sahib. They didn't have to be wrenched away from everyone they loved. They weren't bad people. They were just lucky enough to have no idea of the reality I faced. So, what did you notice about the wedding festivities? It's very steeped in tradition, which our weddings here are very steeped in tradition as well, right? Traditions are very important in wedding ceremonies, whatever culture you're at. Our traditions are different than their traditions, though, right? Right? So this was actually not even the wedding night, the wedding day. This is the day before. So their weddings actually last multiple days, which we kind of have. We have a rehearsal dinner. Have any of you had to go to a rehearsal dinner before because you were involved in a wedding? Okay, so the rehearsal dinner is the night before and then the wedding, but not everybody goes to the rehearsal dinner. But in this culture, Pakistani culture, everybody goes to the night before. That's part of the tradition.
Yeah, the rehearsal dinner is just if you're like walking up with on the what do you call it? Like at my uncle's wedding, there was like a carpet because they were outside.
Mm-hmm.
They had like a
Yeah, so like when
and
you,
and people that are help setting up the room where everybody ate
yeah.
and danced, and that was really it.
Yeah, so it's really just for the people that are helping with the wedding or involved in the wedding in some way. Standing up, ushers, um, musicians, just things like that. But in Amal's culture, everybody gets to go. So that's like the big party. I don't know if it's the only big party. It seems like there's a lot of parties. Sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know. I think it'd be very interesting to see to be in that kind of wedding. Yes.
I was a bridesmaid for my aunt's wedding, and she actually had two because of COVID. And both of the times we had to go the day before and set up everything for her because it was just a small one. Because, like I said, because of COVID, we didn't have many people, so we did all the setups by hands.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Chapter 35. Gollum would be here to pick me up any minute. As I packed boxes of my favorite biscuits into my suitcase for Fatima and the others, there was a knock on the door. Seema went to open it, but instead of Gollum, it was Fazia. I brought these for you, Fazia said. She stepped inside with a box of yellow lettuce. She set it on the table. Thank you, I've missed your sweets, I said. Seema, my mother said, can you get a plate for them? No, they're for Amal. I know how much she loves them, Fazia said. I came to say goodbye, and I had a question. She hesitated. I heard you work for Nazreen. Do you think if you talked to her about something, she might listen? Why? I asked. What happened? Fazia shook her head and squeezed her eyes shut. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Tell me, please. I grabbed her hands. What's wrong? It's ever since we replaced our roof, and then we needed a little more to fix our freezer, and then there was the wedding. We're paying as much as we can each month, but when his officer came to collect last time, he said if we don't increase our payments soon, he'll take drastic measures. But we can't pay any more than we already are. We can't. Fazia, my mother said, Amal is a servant in their home. What power do you think she has? Look how indebted we are. There was a sound of a car pulling up, and the back door creaked open. Seema rushed into the living room as my father stepped inside. Gollum is outside, but he said you could take your time. Fazia stood. I don't know what I was thinking. She looked at my mother and to me. Except if there was a chance, I had to ask. I know, my mother hugged her. I blinked back tears after Fazia left. I wish I could help her. Amal, even if you could help them, imagine who else will come to you for the same, my mother said. She put her arm around me. It was then I noticed her arms were bare. Where are your gold bangles? I asked. My mother glanced at my father. She sold them, he said. But those bangles were as much a part of my mother as her long wavy hair. I couldn't remember a moment she didn't have them on. It's the first thing we did when you left, Seema said. We were sure we could work something out, but even with her wedding jewelry, the tractor, the television, even if we sold them all, it wouldn't be enough. Not even close. I looked at my mother and my sisters. Seema's arms were crossed, her face ashen. They had tried everything they could to think of to get me back and failed. So if they were continuing with their lives, it was because they had no other choice, just like me. I'm not leaving that place, am I? I whispered to my father. I waited for him to answer my question. Instead, he hugged me tight. I hugged the rest of my family goodbye, my mother, my sisters. I kissed the baby. She smiled at me and cooed, but I knew I would soon be a stranger to her again. I thought coming home would help me feel better, but now all I could see were my mother's bare wrists, Fazia's frightened face, and a baby sister who would never know me. How many lives had this man upended, and why did no one stop him? Yeah, maybe she should have let the cops go through the house. How? But because the cops went, she didn't, because she stopped them, she got a little more freedom, right?
But she might have went home if she didn't stop him.
Yeah.
She could have like
But do you think they would have found anything? I don't know. Guy like Jawad Sahib, I think he'd cover his tracks. I don't know.